Good afternoon to all. Welcome back to the talk series. We are in the last session of today's program. We have Dr. Deepu with us, and he will be talking about diversity, distribution, and phytogeographic affinity of angiosperms in the Western Ghats. And regarding Deepu, he is a plant ecologist and taxonomist with a primary interest in the conservation ecology of threatened plants in the Western Ghats. And he is a trained IUCN Red List assessor and NBS professional. He is also a member of IUCN Commission and various other international networks like BGCI, Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Network, etc. And he is currently the lead author of International Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, Nexus Assessment, and recently he has been awarded Kerala State Young Scientist Award 2020, and most recently he has also got an international recognition, BGCA Marsh Award for International Plant Conservation 2021. And he has published more than 30 research papers, including 9 new species, and he has immensely contributed to the Red List assessment of more than 100 species. I welcome Dr. Deepu to the dais, and over to Deepu.
Thank you, Sri sir. So I will be talking on the diversity, distribution, and phytogeographic affinity of angiosperms in the Western Ghats. I will not be going much deeper into this subject. I will be giving only a peripheral overview on the subject. So by starting, I will be giving a background overview on some of the basic concepts. So you all should have heard about the biodiversity hotspots. What actually is a biodiversity hotspot? Considering we are sitting in a biodiversity hotspot, we are supposed to know what actually is a biodiversity hotspot. The biodiversity hotspots are can be simply defined as the Earth's most biodiversity rich and yet threatened terrestrial regions. A region must meet 2 strict criteria to be classified as a biodiversity hotspot. It must at least have 1,500 vascular plants as endemics. That is, it should have a high percentage of plant life found nowhere else on the planet. And it must have 30% or less of its original natural vegetation, which means the region should be a threatened ecosystem, which has lost around 70% of its original vegetation over the past. When we look into the evolution of the concept of biodiversity hotspots, this was first coined in 1988 by British ecologist Norman Mayers. He had published in the Nature journal with a publication denoting 10 regions as hotspots. Later on in 1996, the Conservation International and International Organization has reassessed the regions with a set of criteria and recognized 25 hotspots. In 2005, again, the list of hotspots has been revised, involving 400 scientists in an extensive study, recognizing 34 biodiversity hotspots. Currently, there are 36 biodiversity hotspots recognized across the world, with North American coastal plain as the last biodiversity hotspot listed in 2016. This map shows the distribution of the biodiversity hotspots. These biodiversity hotspots are intact regions, which represents about 2.5% of the Earth's land surface, but they support more than half of the world's plant species as endemics. That is, the species found nowhere else in the world, and nearly 43% of the mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibious species found in these regions are endemics. When you see the map, you can see that the biodiversity hotspots are mostly concentrated to the South and Southeast Asian region, showing the species richness of this region. So how many biodiversity hotspots are there in India? We have 4 biodiversity hotspots in India. Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is part of the Sundarland hotspot. The Sundarland hotspot represents the regions in the Southeast Asia, covering Java, Borneo, Sumatra, and their surrounding small islands. Next is the Northeast Indian region, which falls under the Indo-Burman hotspots, which includes the lower Mekong catchment area, eastern Bangladesh, northeastern India, Myanmar, part of Yunnan province in China, and some islands in South China Sea. The third one is the Western Ghats, which is a part of Western Ghats and Sri Lanka hotspot, which, as you know, is towards the southern part of India. And Himalayas, which is part of the Himalayan hotspot, which spread across 5 countries: Bhutan, India, Nepal, China, and Pakistan, which is the largest transboundary hotspot among the 36 biodiversity hotspots. The transboundary meaning a region which falls across multiple countries. So when we look into the biodiversity wealth of India, India is probably the only country encompassing the 4 biodiversity hotspots and treated as one of the 17 mega biodiverse countries identified by the World Conservation Monitoring Center of UNEP. The country is represented by 2.4% of the global land area, but it holds around 8% of the biodiversity, global biodiversity. In India, 5.26% of the area comes under protected areas, with around 564 wildlife sanctuaries and 106 national parks. Also, there are 218 community reserves and 18 biosphere reserves. The biosphere reserves are nominated for the conservation of biodiversity along with its sustainable use. As a rough estimate, it is estimated that there is around 47,000 floral species in India and 89,000 fauna. Coming to the Western Ghats, the Western Ghats is a chain of mountains running parallel to the west coast of India, representing geomorphic features of immense importance with unique biophysical and ecological processes. And it is recognized as one of the 8 hottest hotspots. Roughly, we say that the Western Ghats is around 160,000 square kilometers in area, with an end-to-end length of 1,600 kilometers. But according to the Western Ghats Ecological Expert Panel, the actual area of Western Ghats is only 129,037 square kilometers, and it has a length of 1,490 kilometers. The minimum width is around 48 kilometers and maximum width is 210 kilometers. The entire range of the Western Ghats is divided into 3 sections based on the geology. Northern Western Ghats from Tapti River to Goa, Central Western Ghats south of Goa up to Coorg, and Southern Western Ghats which is downwards to the Coorg. The Western Ghats has the highest protected area coverage in India, which is about 15%, with around 21 national parks and 68 sanctuaries. 40% of the area in Western Ghats falls under any of the protected areas. Outside the protected areas, which are regarded as reserve forests. And Bandipur National Park is the largest protected area in Western Ghats. Silent Valley National Park and Kudremukh National Park about the important virgin tropical forest tracts. Regarded as one of the hottest hotspots of biodiversity, a simple comparison will give us an understanding on the significance of Western Ghats region. When we consider an Agasthyamala region around, it is around 2,000 square kilometer in area. But when we look into Great Britain, it is 3 lakh square kilometer area. But when we look into the species composition, Agasthyamala holds around 2,000 species, but there is only 1,850 species seen in the Great Britain, even though it is having a larger area. These are a representation of some of the vegetation types in Western Ghats. The first one is the reeds. The second one is the Meristica swamps, which is a significant ecosystem found only in the Western Ghats in India. And third is the highland grasslands and mountain shola forests, scrub jungles, dry deciduous forests, evergreen forests, and moist deciduous forests. Coming to the angiosperm flora of Western Ghats region. To give you an overview, it is as per the study completed in 2014, which is a checklist published by Nair et al. There are around 7,402 species in Western Ghats belonging to 1,480 genera, represented in 210 families. When we look into the nativity of the species found in the Western Ghats, around 76% is an indigenous flora, and 19% is belong to the cultivated or planted. And 376 species are exotics, which are naturalized. Among the indigenous flora, 2,253 are Indian endemics, of which 1,273 are Western Ghats strict endemics. And in the cultivated or planted category, around 1,198 species are exotics, which are in cultivation. The dominant families with high endemic species are Poaceae, Rubiaceae, Orchidaceae, Balsaminaceae, and Cyperaceae. In Western Ghats, 4 hotspots of endemics has been recognized. One is the Agasthyamella with 210 strict endemics, another Anomalous and Anemone region with 172 strict endemics, Nilgiris with 153 strict endemics, and Ethnagiri and adjoining areas with 131 strict endemics. 8 microcenters of endemism is also recognized in the Western Ghats. So, what is an endemic species? Endemism denotes the confinement of a plant or animal taxa to a restricted area, either in a small habitat or in a biogeographic region, which are isolated by geographical or temporal barriers. Endemism has its significance as it shows the centers of speciation, areas of extinction, and vicariance and adaptive evolution of the flora. The endemics are divided into different categories based on the evolutionary age and affinities, spatial distribution, or local abundance. I have shown here 2 photographs of the species. One is Paphiophyllum drury and another is Urina lobata. Paphiophyllum drury is a strict endemic species which is found only in the Agasthyamella region. But Urina lobata is a species which is having a distribution throughout the tropics and subtropical region. Just to add to this, there is an interesting fact regarding this Paphiophyllum drury. This species was first described by Beddoe in 1870, named after the collector of the specimen, Heber Drury. And this species was later extensively taken to Europe for cultivation and hybridization due to this ornamental value of this species, which leading to a almost total eradication of the species from the locality from where it was first described. Later on, it was rediscovered only in 1972. But unfortunately, after the rediscovery, the entire colony has been collected by the local collectors for marketing, reducing the number of species plants in the wild to below 10 individuals, which later on the institutions like Tropical Botanic Garden had taken up recovery programs for the restoration of this species. Inferred based on the evolutionary age and affinities, the endemics are categorized into 2. One is paleoendemics, which are representing the remnants of old floras and usually occurs in land masses of geographical antiquity. Mostly the paleoendemic species are woody life forms, which are taxonomically isolated taxa having no closely related taxa, and they show a low level of polyploidy, and they will be distinct in their distribution and will be having possible fossil relatives. The one shown here is Rhododendron arboreum subspecies Nilgiricum, which is endemic to the southern Western Ghats, and the closest relative of this species is seen in the northeast Himalayas only. The second category is the new endemic species. As the name indicates, these are newly evolved endemic taxa, possibly from an actively evolving genetic stock, which will be occurring only in a particular ecotones. The new endemic species have closely related taxa occurring in the same area, and they will be developed as part of a ongoing speciation process, and it shows a high level of ploidy. Mostly herbaceous and shrubby forms are coming under the new endemic category, which are subjected to environmental or climatic stress. These are two recently described species from Nelliyambadi Hills, Impatiens shashidharani and Impatiens shashidharani variety hirsuta. These species are allied to Impatiens rupicula, which is also seen in these regions. And this hirsuta can be considered as a new endemic taxa, which has evolved from Impatiens shashidharani. Based on the local abundance, the endemics will be categorized either into geographical regions or based on a political boundary, like Western Ghats endemic. In this case, cinnamon gambly, which is seen only in the Western Ghats region of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, or Parasopibia hoffmanni variety albiflora, which is a species described from Madaipara region and Madurai region in Tamil Nadu, which is considered as South Indian endemic, and Ringospora pandurangani, which was described from the Wayanad region, and this can be considered as a Kerala endemic within the political boundary of Kerala. And Alstonia venenata, which has a distribution across the peninsular India region, so this is considered as a peninsular India endemic. And Sorcia corymbosa, which is seen in the Western Ghats region as well as the northeastern Himalayas, and hence it is considered as an Indian endemic. With respect to the spatial distribution, the endemics are classified into three. One is point or local endemics, which are the species restricted to a small area or a microhabitat that is less than or equal to 5 square kilometer, which are mostly regarded as the point or local endemics. Silent Valley Nahiri, a species seen only in the Silent Valley. This can be considered as a point endemic or local endemic. Ixacum carolensis, this is a recently described species from the Muttikulam region, which is seen nowhere else and has a area of occupancy of less than 4 square kilometer, and this can be regarded as a local endemic. Clematis petimudiensis is another species described from the Petimudi region. This can also be regarded as a local endemic. And Impatiens johni, this is also seen only in some pockets in the Iravikulam region, close to the Edamalakudi area. This can also be considered as an example for a local endemic species. Another based on the spatial distribution is the biotope endemics. Biotope is nothing but it is a habitat. It's another term used for representing an habitat. Biotope endemics are seen in the regions that are distinguished by environmental conditions, either in the form of climate, soil, or altitude, and it will be having a characteristic assemblage of organisms. Polycarpia renkayana, this is a species seen only in the lateritic habitats on the northern Kerala, mostly in Kannur and Malappuram region, with an association of certain grass species. And Impatiens claviconu, which is restricted to the high altitude regions of Nilgiris, mostly in the Upper Bhavani region. And this is also having a strict requirement of habitat. And species of Striga, most of the species which are endemic to the Western Ghats region can also be considered as biotope endemics, as most of the species of Striga requires a specific host. Another category based on the spatial distribution is phenotypic endemics. This is actually another type of biotope endemics, but with much more restricted area of occurrence. The plant shown here is Impatiens animudica, which is restricted to the Shola forest margins in the Iravikulam region, which is not seen nowhere else in the Idiki also. It has a specific habitat requirement. So due to its diversity in microclimatic conditions, providing unique niches, the Western Ghats is one of the active centers of speciation. The one shown here is Impatiens, belonging to the family Balsaminaceae. This is one of the dominant genera in Western Ghats region, with over 120 species described so far. For this genus, the Western Ghats is one of the centers of diversity in Southeast Asia and is also an active center of speciation. The species shown here are all endemic to the Western Ghats region. Impatiens aqualis, the first one, is seen towards the northern Western Ghats region. Diversifolia is comparatively having a larger distribution. Impatiens grandis is endemic to Tamil Nadu and Kerala region of the Western Ghats. Impatiens raceana is reported only from the Karnataka region. Rubicola is also having a vast distribution in the Western Ghats region. And Impatiens lavi, those from Maharashtra will be knowing this species. It is restricted to the Karst Plateau in Maharashtra region. Impatiens fruticosa, it is seen in the Nilgiris as well as in the Western Ghats in the Kerala region. Impatiens dalsali, again a species seen only in the northern Western Ghats region, mostly confined to the Trambakeshwar hills and adjoining areas in Maharashtra. Impatiens barbari, it is seen in Karnataka. Impatiens alicea is having a common distribution in Western Ghats region. And Impatiens monarensis, it is a strict endemic to the Devikulam region. And Impatiens phoenicia is also seen only in the Idukki areas. The species found in the Western Ghats contribute in a high degree on the provisional and cultural services provided by the ecosystems in Western Ghats. There are a lot of species which can be used as ornamental plants for its aesthetic value without any detrimental effects compared to the exotic ornamental plants which are introduced into our gardens as they later became a garden escape. The first one, Tambargia mysorensis, is a climbing species. It is endemic to the Western Ghats region. And in Justitia sandapau is another endemic species. Acrotrima arnotianum is a species endemic to the Western Ghats region. Even though these species are endemic, this species is having a high aesthetic value and it is easy to propagate these species and introduce into our gardens. They show a wide range of habitat in which they can grow. Crotrima arnotianum is seen only in habitats above 800 meter altitude, but this species can be grown in our gardens after a period of acclimatization. Vernonia arborea is a tree species. Ringostylis retusa is an orchid, as in the case of Globa siciliflora. This is a small species, but it shows a vigorous flowering, and so it can be used as a ornamental plant. These are some of the ornamental plants in the family Gentianaceae, which are endemic to the Western Ghats region. There are a lot number of species which can be considered as the wild relatives of the cultivated crops. I'm showing here an example of wild pulses. In a study conducted in TBGRI for the Forest Department of Kerala, we could identify around 23 cultivars of pulses, which includes land races developed from the wild species. Looking into the threat status of the angiosperm species found in the Western Ghats region, this is the current status. We have only the data of 885 species available in the IUCN Red List, of which 36% falls under different threat categories. The data shown is here is taken after the recent update to the IUCN Red List. You can see that around 7% is critically endangered and another 17% is coming under the endangered category. There are some other categories like low risk, least concern, low risk, near threatened shown here. These are from the previous assessments done before 1994. As per the revised guidelines of the IUCN, which is 3.1, revised in 2001, there is no category like conservation dependent or low risk, near threatened. There will be only categories like extinct, extinct in wild, regionally extinct, which will be given only for the species for which an assessment is done on a regional level. critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable are together considered as the threatened category. And again, there will be a category near threatened, which includes the species which will be in some meeting the some criteria for categorizing as a threatened plant, but will not be completely fulfilling the requirements for treating as a threatened category. Those species will be categorized as a near threatened. Least concern are those species which will be having a wider distribution and hence will not be qualifying for any threatened category. Data deficient are those species for which an assessment has been done in the IUCN Red List, but there will not be enough data to be used for categorizing these species into any of the threatened categories. So it will be temporarily considered as data deficient, which will be reassessed. So when we look into the status of flora of the Western Ghats with regard to the threatened species, around 7,995 taxa, which includes subspecies as well as varieties other than the species, occurs in the Western Ghats region. And so the status of only 11% of the taxa is known so far. Sadly, we are also not considering of doing any regional level threat status assessments, which is a requirement of the time. 37 taxa listed in the IUCN Red List is still data deficient. And a majority of the species assessed in the IUCN Red List is based on very old data, which are yet to revised. There is a threshold of period which after which every assessment has to be revised. Most of you have heard of this global tree assessment report, which has been published last year in September 2021, in which they had assessed globally the status of 58,000 tree species. And they had reported that 30% of the tree species occurring all across the globe is threatened. We had recently undertaken a study to assess the threat status of tree species of the family Lauraceae in the Western Ghats region as part of this global tree assessment. 93 species are seen in the Western Ghats region in the family Lauraceae, of which 60 species are endemics. Of the 93 species found here, 67% is found to be belonging to any of the threat categories, with around 25 species falling under the critically endangered category and 24 species falling under the endangered category. When we look into habitat-wise distribution of the threatened species in the Western Ghats region, 40% of the threatened species are found in the evergreen forest, and another 24% is mostly confined to the altitude above 1,800 meters, and 10% is lithophytes, and 8% is epiphytes, with around 9% riparian flora. When we look into the phytogeographic affinity of the flora of the Western Ghats region, around 33% of the species seen in the Western Ghats are of Indian origin, with another 28% having an Indo-Malayan affinity. 14% is having an affinity with the Sri Lankan flora, and 8% through the West Asia. 7% of the species found in the Western Ghats is having a pan-tropical distribution, and 2% is of African origin. Pan-tropical species are those occurring or distributed throughout the tropical regions of the earth, and there is a 4% species which is falling under the Paleoarctic region. Paleoarctic is the largest biogeographic realm of the earth, and it is stretches across the Eurasian North region. So, as a conclusion, what I presented now is only a few statistics about the angiosperm flora. When we consider the other forms of the other life forms present in the Western Ghats region, including the faunal species and other gymnosperms, lichens, etc., there is a need for conserving this biodiversity beyond the protected areas. And we should be considering to conserve these areas based on the key biodiversity areas. This is a concept in which the sites contributing significantly to the global persistence of the biodiversity is recognized, which recognize both terrestrial freshwater as well as marine ecosystems. There is a need for the identification of ecologically sensitive and key biodiversity areas in the Western Ghats region. Some of them are mystical swamps, riparian vegetation, peat bogs found in the high altitude regions. Hardly there is no study done in the peat bogs in the high altitude regions, and the lateritic plateaus, and the sacred forests. And there is a need for the identification of keystone species in an ecosystem. As you know, the keystone species is an organism that helps in defining an ecosystem, entire ecosystem. Without a keystone species, most of the ecosystem would be dramatically different or cease to exist altogether. And we need to popularize this inheritance farms approach, which helps in the conservation of the indigenous knowledge on local biodiversity, wild relatives of cultivated crops, and land races of traditional cultivars. So let me conclude with a quote from E.O. Wilson, that nature holds the key to our aesthetical, intellectual, cognitive, and even spiritual satisfaction. I hope you will be knowing of E.O. Wilson, who is regarded as the modern day Darwin. Thank you all.